Do whatever you want, even if it's getting married? Don't contact me about every little thing. Even when announcing my marriage, this was all the reply I got from my mom. She, who had always favored my sister and ignored me, showed no interest in me now, just as she hadn't in the past. I would later realize just how mistaken I had been. I'm Tracy, the oldest of 3 girls, and I moved out right after finishing high school. I used to think of all sorts of convincing stories for my friends, but the truth was, I just didn't belong at home. My faint childhood memories do make me believe I was loved by my parents and raised healthily without any worries. I don't know what triggered it, but in my memories, my mom always doted only on my sisters and never even looked at me. I even wondered more than once or twice if I was not really related by blood. So, when my mom once yelled at me, "You really do look like my mother-in-law. Don't look at me with those eyes," I felt reassured that I was indeed a child of this family. Growing up, my sisters saw our mom's attitude and started treating me as if I were heir, just like her. Looking back, it might have been all they could manage as young children. But at that time, they seemed like enemies to me too. Only my dad would speak to me and show concern. But that didn't mean he could rescue me from such an environment. Tracy, I'm sorry. Your mom had a hard time with Grandma. And it's painful for her to see you because you look like Grandma. Think of Mom as pitiful right now and forgive her. My dad, unable to protect my mom from my grandma's harsh treatment, seemed to feel guilty and never openly criticized my mom's attitude towards me. He would apologize to me and always end up demanding patience in his usual manner. I wanted to escape from that house as soon as possible, and decided to go to a university in the neighboring state. Of course, my mom allowed me no financial support from home, saying it was all up to me, and I somehow managed to graduate with part-time jobs and scholarships. Even after graduation, I had no intention of returning to my hometown. I stayed in the neighboring state, got a job, and met and married Fred when I was 24. Since Fred and his parents were keen on having a wedding, we went ahead with it. But when I finally reached out to my family after ages, nothing had really changed. At that time, I think there was still a little hope for me. Nervously imagining my family's reaction, I called home, and my dad answered the phone. My dad was happy about my marriage and glad that I was happy. He was excited that I was doing well, though I hadn't contacted him since leaving home. But when I asked, "How is Mom?" he hesitated awkwardly, apparently recognizing that it was me on the phone. My mom had displayed an attitude as if she had no business with me. I remember feeling a bit disappointed somewhere in my heart. Reluctantly, I hung up the phone and decided to send an email to my mom and sisters, but hoping this could be a new start to treat each other as adults. Even if we were family, the reply I received from my mom was as cold as it had been during my student days. Do whatever you want, even if it's getting married? Don't contact me about every little thing. That was all the response my mom sent, and my sisters didn't even reply. In the end, neither my mom nor my sisters attended our wedding, and my dad, who had planned to come, canceled at the last minute. None of my relatives came. 2 years into our marriage, we had a son. And I contacted my parents again to announce the birth of their first grandchild. As expected, my dad was pleased, but my mom acted as if she had no interest. I finally resigned myself to this outcome. No matter that he was her grandson, my mom viewed him as just another kid who had the same features as her grandma, who she hated. Since then, I have considered only my mother-in-law as my mom, and decided to live as a member of my in-laws' family. Fortunately, I had a good relationship with my in-laws, and since I had gently informed them about my family situation during the wedding, they never pried why I didn't visit my parents' home. My husband and I, respecting each other's views, sometimes received help from my in-laws while raising our child. Years later, when my dad called me for the first time since I had informed him of Alex's birth, I had only contacted him once or twice after that. And recently, not at all. I answered the phone thinking it was unusual for him to call without reason. He started with harmless topics like, "It's been a while," and "Has my grandson grown?" It seemed he didn't even remember his grandson's name. I casually responded while directly asking what he really wanted. Then my dad revealed that he had recently divorced my mom. It seems that with the youngest daughter graduating from university and no more worries about tuition, my mom felt she no longer needed to endure and had initiated the divorce. I didn't know what kind of discussions they had, but my dad accepted the divorce and was now living alone. So, I'm getting old and everything is becoming a burden. So I was thinking of living with you. I don't have much stuff. So I think I could move in with you, but if you were planning to come back, we'd need to find a bigger house. That house has become the property of Mom and the three of them, so where I'm living now is too cramped. I was so surprised that I was speechless. No, that's impossible. We have no intention of living with you, Dad. Sorry, but you have to handle it yourself. Haven't you forgotten how Mom and the others treated me? Asking for help now just because you're having a hard time. I might be a cold person, but I just couldn't bring myself to help my dad. Eventually, this led to a complete cessation of communication with him and, effectively, an estrangement. So, living happily while only interacting with my in-laws. One day while I was thinking about the dinner menu, I was playing store with Alex. Though it was supposed to be a donut shop, for some reason, airplanes and dinosaurs were being sold as new items on the menu. The smiling shopkeeper, my son, was about to hard sell me donuts with lots of extras for $10 million. Under a so-called special mom discount when the doorbell rang suddenly. It was a Sunday, and my husband Fred was not home due to work. I paused Alex's playtime a bit to check the intercom. And there stood an unexpected person. "Tracy, you're there, aren't you? Open the door quickly." The woman glaring at me through the monitor was my mom, looking a bit older than I remembered. I panicked and opened the door like I used to in my student days. Then, my mom took a good look at me and said with a smirk, "You're starting to look just like that old witch now." Hearing this, I snapped back to reality. Right, I'm not a powerless child anymore. I have Alex to protect, so I need to be strong. Without letting her into the house, I asked her why she had come. As if she had been waiting for my question, my mom responded, "I've come to take my grandson. I'll raise him as my son, so hand him over quickly," she commanded unilaterally. It made no sense. I naturally refused her sudden and absurd demand. I learned later that over the past few years, as my sisters had each gotten married and started their own families, my mom, having abandoned my dad, was left living alone. My mom adored my sisters since they were little, but once they got married, they began to create some space from her because she was too protective. Not able to deal with that, she started interfering with their husbands a lot, which ended up causing a big rift between them. She set her sights on my son to fill her loneliness. My mom, who had been severely tormented by her mother-in-law for not having any sons, had always dreamed of raising a boy. Confident that if she pressured me, I would happily hand over my son, she had come uninvited. "Don't even think about coming with us. You really do look like your mother-in-law. And I honestly don't even want to see your face. The child is a boy. So he must resemble his dad, right? Look, you can't even raise him properly. So I'm saying I'll do it." Irritated and saying that she had come all this way after getting my address from my dad, my mom demanded I hand over my son. I was so angry that I yelled at her right at the front door. "There's no way I'm handing him over. If you think of my child as some object, then just go back." At that moment, the living room door opened, and Alex came out to see what was happening. I quickly picked him up and moved away from my mom. Then, my mom changed her tone and started talking to Alex. "Oh, what's your name?" From today, you'll live with Grandma. No, Grandma doesn't suit me. Call me Mommy. Come on, try saying it. Mommy. Forced by a stranger he couldn't even recognize as his grandma to call her Mommy. My son was confused and froze. Knowing that Mom and Mommy meant the same thing, Alex felt something close to fear at her words. Ignoring my attempts to stop her, my mom persistently instructed him to call her Mommy, causing Alex to grimace and finally say no. It was a natural reaction. But my mom became furious. He's so disobedient because you raised him. She screamed, directing her anger at me. Holding Alex. I felt threatened and pushed my mom out the door, locking it quickly as she stumbled. After managing to send my mom away that day, she kept insisting on taking my son, which left me uneasy. The next day, just before finishing work, I received a call from the daycare. Apparently, a stranger claiming to be Alex's grandma had come to pick him up. And the teachers were explaining that they couldn't hand him over since they hadn't received any notice from us parents about someone else picking him up. I assured them that I hadn't asked anyone to pick him up and rushed to the daycare. As expected, it was my mom who had come to pick up Alex. And I remembered having once told my dad that Alex had been admitted to a daycare near our home. After being ambushed at home the day before, my husband, in-laws, and I had discussed being wary of further contact with my mom, and here I was, cursing my past naivety. I apologized to the teachers, saying, "She is indeed Alex's grandma." But by then, my mom had already caused a scene, trying to forcibly take a child with her, and the daycare director had called the police. Explaining the situation to the police surrounding my mom, they began to suggest we should discuss this as a family since she was really the grandma. However, with many other parents around at pickup time, there was outcry over someone trying to take a child away, blood relation or not. Finally, the police took my mom away. But she was quickly released with just a verbal warning. Since then, my mom gave up trying to take Alex from the daycare, but started lurking around our house, eventually becoming known in the neighborhood watch as an old woman trying to kidnap a boy. Although her obsession was pretty terrifying, she kept coming around us, leading to a lot of police warnings because of the complaints. Then she caused a definitive incident. Unsure when my mom might attack, we couldn't use the small, less crowded park we usually went to. So, we chose a larger park, bustling with families on weekends, though it was a bit far from our home. On a sunny day off, I watched Alex run excitedly towards the slide, saying he'd wave before sliding so I should watch. Sitting on a bench with a clear view of the slide, I nervously watched him hurry, fearing he might fall. Fred wandered around looking for a spot to film our son coming down the slide. When Alex reached the bottom of the slide and lined up behind a few other children waiting their turn, suddenly, an adult pulled him from the line by his arm. I felt the blood drain from my body and ran towards Alex with all my might, calling out to Fred as I did. Crossing the short distance and bursting through the bushes behind the slide, I saw a car stopped on the road, with Alex about to be forced into it. I screamed for help while desperately clinging to Alex. Fred caught up and pulled both me and Alex away from the car. Holding the crying Alex tightly, I reassured him that everything was all right, noticing my own body shaking. It's okay," I repeated to myself over and over. It was indeed my mom who had tried to take Alex away, and Fred was yelling at her to stop as he held her arm. When 2 police officers arrived thanks to someone's call. Seeing my mom, the officers looked exasperated and said, "You again," but this time it wasn't resolved with just a verbal warning. Testimonies from the caller that my mom had grabbed the child's arm and tried to force him into a car led to her being arrested for attempted kidnapping of a minor, and she was sentenced to prison. Even after the sentence was confirmed, my mom did not apologize. Instead, during the interrogation, she insisted I didn't do anything wrong. It's Tracy's fault for not just giving me my grandson. She needs to come over and apologize to me. Upon her release, she demanded her daughters come to pick her up. But they refused, asking who would willingly take in an overly interfering mom. Later, she returned to her hometown to live modestly. But upon hearing that my in-laws were supposedly wealthy, she shamelessly asked me for financial assistance, as if forgetting all the trouble she had caused us. Let's live together happily as a family across 3 generations, she had the nerve to suggest. Naturally, I refused. This time, I cut off contact without hesitation. Rumors spread unknowingly. And since then, my mom has been ridiculed as a shameless woman in her hometown, clinging to the house she had snatched during the property division with my dad since she had nowhere else to go. Our family has finally regained a peaceful life. But it's frightening to know that my mom knows where we live. Given her nature, even if she's out of savings now, she might save up from a part-time job and come to bother us again. So, we plan to move to the area where my in-laws live. We're currently in a temporary apartment that my mom isn't aware of. But we're looking to build a new home on my in-laws' land. We'll be living separately, but not too far from each other. Fortunately, I haven't told my dad the location of my in-laws' place. But I've decided to truly forget about those people and cherish my current family from now on.